Welcome back, everybody, to Unbashful, and as always, I'm your host, Nicholas Doucette, and I'm excited for another week and another opportunity for me to sit in front of this mic and in front of this camera. And ladies and gentlemen, you all know what this episode is about, The Batman. The Batman is here. It is finally out in theaters everywhere. I was fortunate enough to see it early yesterday, and this whole podcast is going to be essentially my review. I'm going to be discussing everything spoilers, so that is also your warning, by the way. Yes, I will be discussing spoilers because by the time this episode comes out, it will be Sunday. And I think by then, most people that have been really anticipating this film will likely have seen it by Sunday. So that is your warning. Now let's just jump right into it. This film was amazing. It was fucking magnificent. I really can't say it any better than that. It exceeded my expectations. I tried to leave my expectations, or I try to keep them under control. Usually I can. Like for Spider-Man, I was able to keep them under control, but for this film, I just wasn't. I've been looking forward to this film for 3 years, ever since Robert Pattinson was, when the news broke out that he was cast to play Batman. I've just been on board. And for those of you who do not know, Batman is my favorite superhero. As a collection of superheroes and as like a universe of superheroes, Marvel has always been my favorite. But just one individual superhero, Batman has always been my favorite. And I have just been waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally, we've seen it. And like I said, it was very hard for me to keep my expectations under control. I couldn't really turn my brain off. I was just ecstatic. So the fact that this film exceeded my expectations, that's really a testament to how amazing it was and how well directed it was. And the performances were insanely good. They were amazing. And we're going to get into that in more detail in a bit. But just to kind of go through the cast here for those of you who aren't too familiar with everybody involved. So we have Matt Reeves. He's the director. We have Greg Fraser. Love Greg Fraser. He's the cinematographer for this film. He also was the cinematographer for Dune. And I think Prisoners as well, but I could be mistaken. Then obviously we have Robert Pattinson playing Batman. We have Jeffrey Wright playing Commissioner Gordon. We have Paul Dano playing the Riddler. Zoe Kravitz playing Catwoman. Colin Farrell playing Penguin. We're going to talk about him in detail because his performance was fantastic as well. Everybody down the wire was great. John Turturro as Carmine Falcone, Andy Serkis as Alfred. So that's the cast, and yeah, this just kind of getting back to my thoughts here. I thought the film was very dark. I've heard a lot of comparisons to Seven, and yes, I do feel like this film was very similar to Seven, especially with the way it ended. Because if you look at the way Seven ended. I forget the name of like the serial killer, but he wins, but he also loses, right? He loses in the aspect of like he gets killed, and then but if he wasn't going to get killed, then he was going to go to prison because he was caught. But then he also kind of won because unfortunately he massacred Brad Pitt's wife's character, Gwyneth Paltrow. So in a weird, sick way, he won and he lost, and that was sort of the case with the Riddler. The Riddler was in custody. He was arrested by the police. He was put in Arkham Asylum. But his plan unfolded, right? He was able to rally his disciples that were all trying to kill the mayor. And then he was able to flood the city with water. So in a weird way, his plan did happen. It unfolded. But he also lost at the same time. So very, very similar to Seven. And also similar to Seven in other aspects as well. Like with the detective... with the detective aspect and things of that nature, which we'll get into as well. But I love this film. I'm going to go see it again tonight. A friend of mine who couldn't come yesterday with my other friends, him and I are going to go see it tonight, and I just want to see it again personally. So looking forward to that, and I think I'm going to enjoy it even more on my second viewing. Now let's get into the runtime because I'm hearing a lot of people complain about the runtime. For me, I thought the film flowed elegantly. I really didn't have an issue. it is a long movie, objectively. I mean, it's a 3-hour film. It is definitely a lot to take in. But if I compare it to films like The Godfather, which The Godfather is one of the greatest films ever made, but that film at times, at least to me personally, it does have some periods in that film where it can drag. But this film really didn't. It really just didn't skip a beat. There wasn't really any point where I felt the film was slowing down. I mean, it's not like a super high action packed Batman movie, but it keeps you compelled with the detective work, the scenes where we see Batman, because we see a lot of Batman in this as well. I think this is probably the most Batman you see in a Batman film and the least Bruce Wayne you see in a Batman film. Like in Batman Begins and The Dark Knight Rises, those two films in particular, you get a lot of Bruce Wayne. I would probably say it's almost like a 60-40 split, or maybe even like 50-50. Like, you see a lot of Bruce Wayne in those films. You see very, very little Bruce Wayne in this film. And Matt Reeves described that pretty well, and it actually made a lot of sense once I watched it. Excuse me. He said that this Batman, since he's in year 2, he's like addicted to being Batman. And there's a couple reasons why he's, addicted. Excuse me. I just had to drink some water there. But let me just see here where I'm at. I want to keep my thoughts here organized. Okay, yeah. So we'll get back to that topic with Bruce Wayne and Batman. I want to get back to the runtime. So when the film ended, my friend who was sitting to my right, Shezwin, who's actually been on this podcast a couple of times, he looked at me and he said, like, "It's over? Like, that's it?" And not in a way like, "Oh, thank God it's over." Like, he was saying it in a way like, "Wow, like, I thought there was going to be more. Like, I thought the film was going to keep going." And that's exactly how I felt. And that just goes to show, like, the 3 hours, for me at least, and I don't want to speak for him, but I mean, I think he probably feels the same way. It wasn't an issue. And the film probably could have kept going, in my opinion. But that is kind of the one complaint I'm hearing people say is the runtime. I did have to, it was funny, I did have to use the bathroom at one point, and it was so embarrassing. I think I stepped on someone's foot on my way down the aisle, and that could always kind of be an anxiety-inducing thing, when you have to leave to go to the restroom during the film, and there's like 100 people in the theater, and you feel like all eyes are on you. But I couldn't see. It was so dark, and I literally think I stepped on somebody's foot. I was literally saying, like, "I'm sorry, my bad." And then when I came back after using the bathroom, I went up the wrong aisle. So then I totally just disrupted people's viewing. I went up one aisle higher because I couldn't see my friends because we were in like the middle of the aisle. So if we were kind of towards the stairs, it would have been a little bit easier for me to identify them, but I couldn't really see them. So I thought I was going down the correct aisle, and I got there in the middle, and I was just standing in front of people, and I was like, fuck, like, where are they? And then I saw them. They were down there. I was contemplating just climbing over my seat. I don't know. The last thing I want is to like trip and fall down the fucking theater. That would have been really embarrassing. So then I had to walk back and, get in front of people again and then go back to my seat. So that was kind of embarrassing. But even that sequence that I went to the restroom for, I missed a pretty significant scene. My friend Shezwin told me that Alfred got like bombed or something. Like, he didn't die, but then we see after that he's in the hospital. Can you imagine if they would have killed Alfred in the first film? That would have been a bad choice. But no, Alfred is fine. But that's what I'm saying. Like, it's so hard to step away, whether it's to use the restroom or eventually if you watch this film at home. It's hard to step away to like grab something to eat or whatever. Because like I said, the film does not stop. It keeps on going. There's always something happening. And that, to me, I think that's great. And the fact that a 3-hour film could accomplish that, it could keep you on the edge of your seat the whole time, that is just fantastic. Now, of course, there's never been a film that's been loved by everybody, right? There's people that hate Forrest Gump. There's people that hate The Godfather. There's people that hate Shawshank Redemption. So that's just how it is. All film is subjective. And it's no disrespect for those people that don't like those films. Everybody's opinion holds the same weight. There's no opinion that's more valid than another, right? So there will be people that will watch this film and it just won't be for them. But with that being said, I think that this is a film that if you're a fan of the theatrical experience and if you're a fan of cinema, you need to watch this film. It was amazing. Like, I don't know what else to say that hasn't been said, because I'm sure most of you have probably seen hundreds of other YouTubers and content creators sharing their thoughts. Like, I don't know what else to say to describe my love for this film, and I'm probably going to see it several more times. Now, I'll address the elephant in the room, because I'm sure everywhere you go on the internet, you've probably seen somebody comparing this film to The Dark Knight. I have my own personal feelings on that, but I'm going to say that for the end of the episode, because that's a pretty beefy topic and discussion, and I really want to kind of have that properly and save that for the last. So we'll talk about that towards the end of this episode, but we will address that. Now, as for the setting of this film, this takes place in Batman's second year of being Batman, and I thought that was a really good choice. And we're starting to see other superhero films do that as well. We saw that with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. It just picked up with him being Spider-Man. It didn't show, Uncle Ben getting shot or whatever. And that is, we're seeing that formula with this Batman as well. And I think from a narrative perspective, they wouldn't have been able to tell the story they wanted to in this film if they had done, the storyline of showing Thomas and Martha Wayne getting shot in Crime Alley and seeing the pearls fly off of Martha Wayne's neck and whatever. They could have done that, this story in particular, but it probably would have been the second film in this trilogy. So I'm really, really glad we didn't see that again. Of course, they reference it. They have to. But you don't see it, right? This film begins with Batman right away fighting other criminals. In fact, the first time you see Batman on screen is that scene that we've seen in the trailers when he beats up those kids. He beats up that one guy in particular. He's kind of leading this gang. They all have like face paint on, and then he looks at the camera and he says, "I'm vengeance." That little altercation is the first time we're introduced to seeing Batman in this film, and this Batman movie is literally like the perfect representation of the comic books and a new approach to the character of Batman, because this is a character we've seen many, many times, right? We've had obviously Christian Bale, who's regarded as the best Batman by most people, but that may change with this. But Christian Bale, obviously Michael Keaton, going back way, way back, Adam West. I think he was the first Batman. George Clooney, who I think was my least favorite. And then we have Val Kilmer. Oh, and Ben Affleck, of course. Can't forget about Ben Affleck. So it's hard when you're approaching a property like this, an IP like this. You need to find a way to make it fresh and make it feel new. And I think Matt Reeves did that incredibly well, right? If they would have done the whole, origin story again, I would have watched it. And I'm sure it might have still been a good film, but I'm really, really happy they told this story from the immediate perspective of this is year 2 Batman. He's still learning. He's still trying to figure out, the suit, the fighting, everything. He's still learning. And we see him make mistakes in this film, like the scene when he pulls out sort of like the bat wings, but then he tries to pull out the parachute and gets caught in the bridge, and then he just eats shit and he falls to the ground. And we see that he's making some mistakes, and but at least we don't have to see him, I mean, if they were to do an origin tale, I don't know if they would do Ra's al Ghul and the League of Shadows and all that, but we don't have to see any sort of form of that being repeated. And then I think they also released some kind of novel before the film came out that was showing like an official Warner Brothers Batman prequel novel that shows how Bruce Wayne learned how to fight. And I think Alfred actually taught him how to fight, which is really, really cool. And I think they even said that in the novel that Batman built the Batmobile like from scratch. It wasn't like the Tumblr with, Wayne Enterprises and Lucius Fox, giving it to Bruce Wayne. Speaking of Lucius Fox, I've talked about this with my friends. I don't think we're going to see him in this trilogy. We might. It's possible. Like maybe he gets hired in the second film to work at Wayne Enterprises, and then maybe that's when Batman needs a new suit. And I don't know. They could do that. But I don't know why. I have a gut feeling we're not going to see him in this new universe, but that remains to be seen. Yeah, and the comparisons to Zodiac, Seven, Saw. I've already talked about Seven, but the comparisons to Zodiac relate to the Riddler. The Riddler's outfit is actually very similar to the Zodiac, and just kind of what he does is within that nature of the Zodiac. I mean, he has these riddles, he has these puzzles that he leaves for the police and Batman to solve. That's very similar to what the Zodiac did. He sent the police and he sent news reporters and people ciphers to solve, and it literally took them I think they just solved them for the first time, and I think he's dead now or something. But so sort of the purpose, I guess, of what the Riddler was doing, very, very similar to the Zodiac Killer. And then Saw, I definitely see those comparisons with a lot of the traps that the Riddler uses in this film to kill his victims. Very similar to Saw. There was one trap when I think one of the detectives, it was the second individual that he killed, he literally put like a helmet on his head, and it was like a maze. It had all these little loopholes, and then connected to this mask on his head was a tube that had rats going through it and going through his helmet and essentially eating his face. So very, very Saw-esque, and just an incredibly dark film. It was rated PG-13, but I'm honestly surprised. They were treading on thin ice with that PG-13 rating. Like, they said fuck a couple times in this film. I guess the thing that didn't really push it to that R rating was there wasn't really like you didn't see any breasts, you didn't see any nudity. I mean, there was subtle nudity you kind of saw. Like, there was a point when Batman was kind of being like a little bit of like a peeping Tom. He was spying on Catwoman. He was literally watching her get dressed. And you didn't see any nudity, but you kind of like saw like her nipple a little bit. Other than that, though, really nothing. No nudity, no sex, obviously, and no blood, no like gore or anything like that. So if that was in the film, yes, it would have been rated R. But I mean, it's also tough. Like from a business perspective, like it's Batman at the end of the day. You can't make Batman an R-rated film. As much as we, the adult viewers, would love to see that, you also have to think about kids, right? Kids love Batman. I've loved Batman ever since I was a kid. So if I was like 12, 10 years old, I would be pretty disappointed to know that I wouldn't be able to see this film, at least not for a while. So I get the choice of having it rated PG-13. It didn't impact this film at all. It didn't make it bad. It didn't make it better. It's just it is what it is, right? Now a lot of people discuss the detective aspects of this film. This film is very, very heavy on that, searching for clues, and Batman is this is a very, very smart Batman, and we've seen little glimpses of the detective aspect of Batman, because Batman has always been known as the I forget the term, it's like the best detective or something in the comics. I'm not super familiar with the comics, but I think DC stands for Detective Comics, right? If I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments section. But we've seen little glimpses of the detective side of Batman. Like we've seen some stuff in, the Dark Knight trilogy and even Ben Affleck. But they've never really fully kind of gone down that alley. And they definitely do it in this film. That's why, like, this isn't the most action-packed Batman you've seen. The action scenes are phenomenal. And because there's not as much, you almost appreciate them more when they happen. But that does not mean that this film is slow by any means, because the detective journey that Bruce Wayne and Jeffrey Wright's Lieutenant Gordon go through together, speaking of which, we'll speak on their partnership shortly. It was really, really captivating, and it really kept me at the edge of my seat. Gotham. This is another big one. I've heard a lot of people say that Gotham in and of itself is a character. 1000% agree. This was the best portrayal of Gotham City I've ever seen. Aside from like the Arkham games, this is like the closest thing I've ever seen to it. It was magnificent from the visuals of how it looked. Even Bruce Wayne's house just screams Gotham. Like it's just very like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like medieval kinda. I don't even know if that's the right term. Just like, yeah, just very like dark, and it just screamed Batman and Gotham in his house. Whereas like the Christian Bale Nolan films, I always just had a problem with like, I get the film was really trying to be grounded and realistic, and so is this film as well, but it literally just felt like I was watching Batman in Chicago, because that's where they film most of the Nolan films, was in Chicago. It just didn't scream Batman to me. It didn't have that dark criminal kind of tone. It sort of did in Batman Begins when Batman goes through the Narrows. But other than that, like it didn't really feel like Gotham City at all. It just felt like a normal city to me. So I'm glad this film really made you feel like you were there in Gotham City, and I loved it. Moving on to performances. I thought the performances across the board were incredible. Every actor was tremendous. I don't think there was any outliers. There wasn't anybody that didn't look like they fit in. Everyone was masterful. I'm gonna get to Robert Pattinson obviously, but let's address the supporting characters first, and then we'll get to him. Jeffrey Wright, love Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner Gordon. I spoke to, I'm not gonna say his name, but I spoke to my one friend yesterday, and he had it was a valid criticism, but I thought it was kind of funny. He essentially described Gordon as sort of Batman's liaison. He was basically saying like Batman would say something very vague and very hard to understand, and then Gordon would sort of explain to everybody what he was saying. I mean, that is true. Like that, but I did think that was kind of funny. But all jokes aside, I really did like Bruce Wayne or Batman's chemistry with Commissioner Gordon. I honestly enjoyed it more than I think I did with the Christian Bale and God, I'm drawing a blank on Commissioner Gordon's name for the Nolan films. It's on the tip of my tongue. What is it? It's gonna come back to me. Yeah, but anyways, the Christian Bale and Commissioner Gordon dynamic, I enjoyed that. I thought it was good. There was definitely some levity and some trust between them, because they could trust each other, obviously. And that's a big thing we also see in this film, because we actually find out that out of all the Gotham corruption that we've seen in some other films that's been explored, the most corruption I've ever seen is in this Gotham. All the way down to the district attorney, Coulson, that we see. This guy's literally partying at... So there's the Iceberg Lounge. So it's like the main mob club where all guys like Penguin and Falcone hang out. But then there's like a level below. It's even more VIP. And that, I mean, it's all owned by Falcone, but like that's where Sorry, I said that Penguin does hang out in the Iceberg Lounge, but then there's like that VIP level below that he also goes to as well, which is where Falcone mostly hangs out. And literally in that VIP level, which is down at this level, it's all just corrupt cops and criminals and mob guys. You see the DA, the district attorney of Gotham City, hanging out down there. So it's really, really hard to trust most cops, because they're under that payroll of Falcone. And Gordon is kind of one of the few that's actually there for the right cause. So I really, really enjoyed his banter, his back and forth with Batman. He's sort of able to kind of bring him back to earth, because there's a scene when when Coulson gets killed with the bombing, Batman obviously passes out, and then they bring him back to the station, and they're literally about to take off his mask, and then that's when he wakes up, and then he's about to lose, he's out of control, he's about to beat the shit out of any cop that steps in front of him, and then Gordon has to tell him, like, relax, like, think about what you're doing here, right? And I really, really like that dynamic between him in Batman. Zoe Kravitz as Selena Kyle, she was amazing. I really, really like Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman. I never saw Halle Berry's portrayal as Catwoman. I heard that film wasn't incredibly successful, but we all know the stature and the respect and how talented of a performer Halle Berry is. So I don't think we're gonna hold that against her. with her Catwoman performance. She was probably just following the direction that was guided to her, similar to with George Clooney and his portrayal as Batman, because we all know that the caliber of an actor that George Clooney is. So we're not going to hold that one against him as well. But yeah, not to get off track here, Zoe Kravitz was fantastic as Catwoman and as Selina Kyle. She was very different than all the other Catwoman, which, I mean, that's what you want, obviously, in a new portrayal of the character. We're first introduced to her in this club, right, in the Iceberg Lounge, and she's like a server for Penguin. And then we actually find out that she is the daughter of Carmine Falcone. But she doesn't support him. She fucking hates him because obviously he's terrible. He kills people. He's a murderer. He's just a bad person. Then next we got Colin Farrell. Colin Farrell's the Penguin. I mean, I'm sure you've heard this everywhere, but he was unrecognizable, right? The makeup and the prosthetic team, what they were able to put together was just amazing. He wasn't over the top. Like every time I'm doing this podcast, I literally always forget actors' names, but I always know them when I'm not shooting. Like, I don't know. Danny DeVito, that's his name. Danny DeVito's performance obviously was iconic. I mean, you know, he lived in the sewers and he literally had penguin hands, so it wasn't that kind of over the top. But I still loved Colin Farrell. I think Colin Farrell is the best Penguin we've seen thus far, and I'm just fascinated that Colin Farrell, because Colin Farrell has a very thick Irish accent, and I was just fascinated to see the dialect and how his voice sounded in this film. Like, it was incredible. It really just is a testament to how talented of a performer he is. Like, it's just insane. You'd think like somebody with that strong of an accent, I just couldn't see him doing this sort of like thick kind of like New York, like, what are you doing there? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's a bad, you know, representation, but it's sort of along those lines. Obviously a lot better than mine. But yeah, I was just really, really impressed by Colin Farrell. And I think Robert Pattinson for me is like the standout of this film. But if I had to pick a second, you know, actually I think I would go with Paul Dano as the second standout to me. And then I think third as a highlight, I would definitely go Penguin. And I'm really, really excited to see his show that he's getting on HBO Max, which we'll talk about later. Next, Alfred. Yeah, really, really liked Alfred in this film. I wish we would have seen him a little bit more, but I think we're going to see more of him in the sequel. Now, for me, I think Michael Caine is still probably my favorite Alfred. But I do believe that once I see more of... See, I'm drawing a blank again. Once we see more of Andy Serkis as this Alfred in this universe, I think he's going to become my new favorite personally. And we see that this Alfred, he's got some bruises, he's got some cuts, maybe signaling some kind of military background. We don't know. I think in the comics he was like ex-Special Forces or something. I could be wrong about that. But that's really, really cool. And as I touched on earlier in the prequel novel, they actually explain that he taught Bruce how to fight. So that's also very interesting. Next, Paul Dano. Really, really love Paul Dano. I'm a huge fan of his from his performance alongside Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood, and then Prisoners. Those are two films for me that really, really stand out. I think he's one of the most underrated actors. I don't think enough people talk about Paul Dano. He was just absolutely incredible. I just want to... What was this? There we go. Pen's not working. I like to keep track here of my topics by just kind of circling what I've talked about here. Next, the best part of this film, Robert Pattinson. I've already talked about how much I loved his performance, but he was fucking awesome as Batman and Bruce Wayne. And even the few scenes that we see, because as I mentioned before, Matt Reeves discussed this early version that we see of Batman as someone that's obsessed with being Batman. And I think the reason why is because you can tell that this guy is still very damaged. He's still processing the murder of his mother and father, right? And he grew up without them. It's not that I can't relate to this, of course, but I can only imagine like growing up without your family, without your parents specifically. missing that guidance, that adult figure in your life, that could be very detrimental to your development as a human being. So we could definitely see that he's still suffering from that. And I think he's using Batman, this character, sort of like as an outlet to unleash that aggression and to stop other people from doing and committing potential crimes to other people that happened to his mother and father. So I think that's why Matt Reeves was describing him as being addicted. And I loved it. I mean, as an audience member, I thought it was absolutely incredible. Seeing Batman, literally, I would say we see Batman like 95% of this film. Like 95% of this film, he's in the Batsuit. And, you know, there's a little gray area in there when we see Bruce Wayne kind of out and about. We rarely see him in public, though. That I will say. This version of Bruce Wayne that we see is very, very different from the few scenes that we saw. But he's very, very different from, you know, Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne and Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne. He's not this like playboy. And the problem I always had with those other films, I mean, albeit it's at the end of the day, it's still fiction, right? You have to remind yourself that. But for somebody that really struggles with trauma, maybe even PTSD and things of that nature, I always found it weird how these past iterations of Bruce Wayne have just been able to like with a flick of their finger, just turn that off and be not perfectly fine, but be this like asshole douchebag, you know, I got all the money in the world. And then when it's time to be Batman, like it's time to be Batman. It's like a flick of a switch, you know what I'm saying? But with this Batman, even when you're seeing Bruce Wayne as Bruce Wayne, you still kind of see Batman in him, if that makes any sense. Like you could still see that sort of anger and unsettlement in his, you know, face and his body language, right? He's not just a completely different person. And I get that some people like that. Some people like that a sort of division between having the character. It's almost like two characters in one person, right? You have the Bruce Wayne sort of personality, and then you have obviously Batman. But you could tell that Bruce Wayne is Batman, even when he's kind of Bruce Wayne, if that makes any sense. Like, he's not kicking ass in public, but from an emotional perspective, you can still see that sort of resemble on his face. But I don't want to ramble on about that. What else here? Yeah, and he is very quiet, very soft-spoken in this film. Definitely the fewest lines we've seen out of Bruce Wayne. Like, yeah, he speaks. And overall, I do like his voice. I think it's right in that perfect area. It's not as, like, as, you know, Christian Bale. But it's also not just, like, underwhelming. Like George Clooney. Like, hey, Freeze, it's me, Bruce Wayne, Batman, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just Robert Pattinson saying, I'm Batman. You feel like it's Bruce Wayne. Like that's really something else I could say. Like for a lot of films, and I'm sure people can relate to this, they may watch a big studio film or a big film that has like a really, really well-known actor, and it's like you don't see the character, you just see the actor, right? Like I heard a lot of people say that about the Jack Reacher film with Tom Cruise. Like you don't see Jack Reacher, you see Tom Cruise, right? You don't have any of that with this film. When you look at Robert Pattinson in this film, you see Bruce Wayne. When you look at him in the Batsuit, you see him in the Batsuit. When you look at Colin Farrell, you see the Penguin. You see Oswald Cobblepot. You don't see Colin Farrell. When you look at Paul Dano as a Riddler, you don't see Paul Dano. You see Edward Nashton. You see the Riddler. When you look at Zoe Kravitz, you see Selena Kyle, right? And so on and so on. So that's another really, really great aspect and great compliment I can give to that film. It's the performers are amazing. The direction is amazing. I actually just watched the Planet of the Apes films recently, not to get off track. I've been trying to get caught up on Matt Reeves' films, and such well-directed films. Like, amazing. And obviously Andy Serkis did a lot of the mocap for those films, so it's good to see him back. We know that he's familiar with working with Matt Reeves. And I also just found out that he directed Cloverfield, which is one of my favorite monster kaiju films as a kid. So, anyways, not to get off track here. I just want to make sure I hit everything here on the nose. Yeah, and a great example, because when I say he's introverted and he's very soft-spoken, he's very reserved, it really, really does show off in that funeral scene. And in a little snippet of that funeral scene, we have seen it in trailers, and they released a clip of it online, but we really, really see that he Before he enters the building, he's confronted by Penguin and Carmine Falcone, and you could just see the anger in his eyes. And he's just he says very, very few words. You could tell that he's a man that he will only speak if he feels like he really, really has something like heavy and weightful to say. And as soon as he steps out of the car, you can just see like he looks uncomfortable. He just looks like agitated. You can see the reporters immediately noticing, like, yo, it's Bruce Wayne. And he's just like leave me alone, you know what I mean? So, but then once he steps inside this sort of like cathedral where the funeral's happening, he doesn't say a word. And that scene you have seen online. But yeah, he's a very, very shy Bruce Wayne to a degree. Obviously, you know, he's a superhero by night, and he kicks ass and all that, but he just doesn't really seem like he likes to interact too much with society. He seems very, very isolated in that regard. Yeah, the funeral scene was great. We do see that Coulson, the DA that I mentioned, he comes in the van because he gets kidnapped by the Riddler, and that scene was so intense. Oh my god. Let me talk about that scene for a second. When literally, I think he's given like 3 minutes to solve like 3 riddles. And Batman literally gives him the answer for 2, and the third is Coulson just has to give up, you know, names and people associated with Carmine Falcone, but like we see right there that he can't do that because he knows that he's a dead. He even says like, I'm a dead man either way, right? At least if I don't rat, he's not gonna kill my family. He's not gonna hurt my family. So it really kind of shows like the fear and the control and almost like the dictator that is Carmine Falcone. And then I did find this kind of weird. Then the bomb goes off and then he dies. But then Batman's literally like, okay, this is the mic. This is the mic that I'm using. Picture this as the guy with the bomb around his neck in the film. Batman is literally this close to him. The bomb goes off. That would kill anybody within the vicinity. He just survives. Not a scratch on his face. Nothing. That is my only complaint about this film. Batman took so much damage and not a single, you know, wound or anything to sort of reflect that, right? But I mean, you know, whatever. I can look past that. That is literally my only sort of nitpick I can come up with. Batman was immortal at points in this film. Yeah, because I even talked about it with my friends. Like, he survived that. He got up perfectly from that. But then when he took a shotgun to his body armor, and that was the thing that kind of knocked him out for a brief period of time. So I thought that was kind of funny. But other than that, film was perfect. Anyways, let's continue on here. Let me just make sure here. Yeah, so we got Bruce Wayne. Overall, like, this performance was definitely one of my favorites from Robert Pattinson, but I would still say that I think The Lighthouse is still my favorite performance. That was just like once in a lifetime. That was just incredible. But make no mistake, this was still like a masterclass performance of acting at its finest. So make no mistake, this was still an incredibly great performance by Robert Pattinson, but I would still give that slight edge to The Lighthouse. Personally for me, but who knows, maybe on a second viewing tonight, I might change my mind, because a lot of things could really change when you watch a film for a second time, right? A third and a fourth and a fifth time, I mean, at that point, that's just, you know, nothing is really going to change, but a second viewing could really kind of change things. It can make you actually enjoy the film less, or it can make you find a newfound appreciation for the film. So we'll see what happens tonight. I definitely don't think I'm going to enjoy it less. I'm really, really looking forward to watching it again. So let's get here to the next topic, the Batsuit. This is something I really, really do want to talk about. The Batsuit is growing on me. It's not my favorite though. As much as I do like it, I still do think that Ben Affleck's Batsuit, I'm not saying Ben Affleck as Batman, I'm saying Ben Affleck's Batsuit is still probably my favorite. But I do think that second viewing, maybe even in the sequel, we'll get a new suit. Probably will, because, you know, Matt Reeves described that this Batsuit is very particular, you could tell that Bruce Wayne put it together himself. If you look at the shoulder pads, it almost looks like he took it from like a SWAT uniform. So it's very homemade, if you will. And we will for sure see a new suit. And I do really like the suit in this film. I'm a big fan of the cowl. I think the cowl and the chest part are probably my favorites. I'm still, the gauntlets on his forearms are still, still growing on me. Not a huge fan of those. But I do like it. I do like it. I think it's better than the Christian Bale Batsuit. I've always had a huge issue with the Nolan Batsuit, especially the Dark Knight and the Dark Knight Rises Batsuit. I don't know why. It looked more of like a ninja outfit rather than a Batman outfit. In fact, like the bat symbol is so small and it kind of like is hard to notice and see. Like this Batsuit, like the Batsuit is right there. It even has like a purpose. Like he takes it out in the film, literally uses it as a knife, because when the Riddler floods the city, he floods the stadium, and there's literally a wire coming down to the water. And of course, if that electrical wire touches the water, makes contact with the water, everybody in the water will die. So Batman jumps across from this balcony, lands on the wire, pulls out the knife, which is the bat symbol, and cuts the wire. So it has like a use, it has a purpose, and it's very easy to see, and it looks very similar to the Arkham video games Arkham symbol. So I do really like it. It's my second favorite Batsuit, I would say. Now, like I said, I'm sure over time it'll eventually kind of take that number one spot, but it's still growing on me. When I first saw the Batsuit, like 2 years ago, when first images got leaked of them filming, I was not a big fan of it. But when you see something behind the scenes, you have to kind of tame you sort of have to hold back those criticisms a bit, because I had that same sort of reaction when I saw the Batgirl photos that came out several months ago, and we saw the outfit that Batgirl will be wearing. I was not a big fan of it, but I think once we see it on screen in a film in that sort of environment, I'll probably change my mind, and I certainly did for this film. But yeah, I want to be clear. I'm talking about the Batsuit. Just because I like Ben Affleck's Batsuit more, I'm not saying I like Ben Affleck's Batman better. This right now, Robert Pattinson is my favorite Batman I've ever seen all time. He's my favorite Batman. I think he is just like, it's literally a page right out of the comics, right out of comics such as like The Long Halloween, Hush. Just so amazing. I just didn't think we would ever see something like this, right? It is the most comic book accurate, grounded, dark portrayal of the character that we've seen in Gotham, and everything surrounding Bruce Wayne in the storyline. It's the most Batman we've seen. But the suit, though, I still really, really do like Ben Affleck's Frank Miller inspired Batman Returns suit. But who knows? My opinion could change over time. Next, we are going to move on to the ending of this film and the Joker tease, and I'm going to discuss some theories I have, and we're going to speculate about what could happen in the future films. So yes, we did get a Joker tease in this film, and of course that the Joker is now being played by Barry Keoghan. Now, I've heard some people pronounce his name as Kean. I'm not quite sure. The way it's spelt to me, I'm going to pronounce it for the meantime as Keoghan, and correct me if I am wrong, somebody out there watching in the comments section. But yeah, so for those of the people similar to me who kind of keep up with the production, keep up with the news, well, a lot of people first found out that Barry Keoghan was involved in this film and was cast for a very unknown role. A lot of people speculated that he was going to be playing the Mad Hatter, because I think he posted some photo on social media of like him standing like against a wall, and like on the wall there's like a drawing of a hat. Maybe that was intentional to mislead us, probably. And then apparently on the call sheet, his name was listed as like some officer. So different kind of conflicting reports and theories and speculation. But we do know that that was all a gag to sort of hide the true identity that Barry Keoghan is in fact playing the Joker. And I really, really liked the way they introduced his character in this film. It was very subtle. You didn't really see his face. but it really kind of gets the blood going, gets the excitement going. Now, a lot of people didn't really want to see another Joker anytime soon. And look, I can understand that, but this is Batman at the end of the day. You have to have Joker at some point be introduced to this character. They can't do a 3-film arc and not have the Joker a part of it in some degree. And me personally, I have no problem seeing another Joker, right? I mean, we have like 3 Batmans simultaneously, in live action, because we also have Ben Affleck coming, and then we have Michael Keaton returning as well. Or should I say Ben Affleck returning? I said coming as if he hasn't already been Batman before. So we could have multiple Batman on screen at different points throughout the year. We could have other Jokers. So I have no problem with another Joker coming, and I certainly don't have a problem with Barry Keoghan playing the Joker. For me, no issues there. I think he's an incredibly fascinating, talented actor. If any of you really want to watch a good movie, check out The Killing of the Sacred Deer. He's in that film with Colin Farrell too, funny enough. And he's very, very weird. The film was very weird, but weird in a good way, like very much psychological, kind of tormenting thriller. And I really highly recommend you guys check out Killing of a Sacred Deer. But yeah, I have really no problem with Barry Keoghan playing the Joker. I mean, obviously my first choice would have been Willem Dafoe, but the writers and Matt Reeves, clearly Willem Dafoe, because I'm sure they probably explore that opportunity. Maybe they even talk to him about, what they could do. But I guess ultimately I think they decided that Willem Dafoe and an actor like him, one of the best actors in the world, but maybe that kind of actor, the way he looks, how old he is, maybe that didn't fit the vision of ultimately this 3-film arc that they want to build. So I trust them, and they clearly think Barry Keoghan is the right guy for the job, and he is an incredible actor. As I mentioned, The Killing of the Sacred Deer, Dunkirk, he was in Eternals. He's actually one of my favorite characters in Eternals. I liked his character, Druig. He's a really, really talented actor. And, his laugh was, it was nothing crazy. There were some reports that described it as hyena-like. That definitely is a bit much, a little bit over dramatic. I didn't get that when I watched it. It was pretty interesting, though, because Matt Reeves was in an interview recently discussing this tease, this cameo, whatever you want to call it. And yes, he did confirm that was the Joker that we saw, if it wasn't already obvious enough. And he said that this Joker is born with a condition that makes it so he never stops smiling, right? And basically, he was trying to explain that, like Batman, like all these very popular IPs and characters, the Joker has been done before many, many times, right? Jared Leto, Jack Nicholson, obviously Heath Ledger, who I still think is the best Joker we've had, and then Joaquin Phoenix. So you want to find a way to distinct yourself and separate yourself from those other iterations, which we're seeing in this film with Batman. But how are they going to approach it with Joker? Now, we don't fully know. You don't really get to see Barry Keoghan very well. You roughly see his face, but it's most definitely him, and it's most definitely the Joker that they're teasing. Some people, I've been hearing some people complain, like, really, we got to go through Joker again? Like, come on, we have a Joker, Joaquin Phoenix, right? And I understand those criticisms and those concerns. But look, at the end of the day, this is Batman, right? This is... the Joker, we all know how iconic of a villain that is to Batman. You cannot do a 3-film arc of the Batman and not have the Joker involved in some capacity. It can't be done. Okay, sorry. That's a little dramatic. It can be done, but come on. Right? Like, you almost need to have the Joker in at some point. And I'll say, I don't think, while we got a tease, I don't think that he's going to be the main villain of the second film. In fact, I think it's going to be Mr. Freeze. Because once again, many discussions, many rumors, many speculation, and even Matt Reeves himself has admitted his interest in how how he has an idea of how he would approach that character. And he said, like, I would really, really like to explore Mr. Freeze, because obviously we've seen it with Arnold, but that was a pretty silly, obnoxious take on the character, as was that entire movie was. So I think it's a really interesting character, and I believe it can be done in this universe. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Turn that off. As I was saying, I think it can easily be done. Not easily, obviously it will be difficult. It's Mr. Freeze after all. But I think Matt Reeves can do it. So, in the Riddler as well, that's another interesting one, because we saw the Riddler in this film. Obviously, he was the main antagonist, but we also see that he does not die. He does not, he's still alive, right? Edward Ashton's still alive. And I do think that we will see him return, albeit minor role, maybe kind of like how we saw Scarecrow from Batman Begins. We did see Cillian Murphy return subtly in other points in The Dark Knight Rises and in The Dark Knight. Those were very, very minor appearances. I do think if we see the Riddler again, it'll be a greater role than something like Cillian Murphy when he returned for his appearances in the other Batman films, but also not as much as a full-on supporting character. He'll have a pretty minor role, I guess, if I explain that right. But I do think Mr. Freeze will be, or Mr. Freeze or the Court of Owls. I think they'll explore one of those two storylines, antagonists, whatever you want to call it. And then I think they're going to save the Joker for that third film. I could be completely wrong. We could look back on this and laugh. But here's the interesting thing, though. Literally a day ago, I think 2 days ago, they just announced, along with the Penguin TV series they're now doing a Arkham Asylum TV series. That's a part of this Batman universe. And I think it's very, very likely that we will see the Joker in that series. Maybe he pops up in the finale. That would be a pretty interesting way to, end the show. But I think we'll see him in that. But I do also think that we are going to see him in the second film. Now, I just said I don't think he's going to be the villain of the second film. I believe that. But I think we will still see him in the second film. Maybe it's right at the end, kind of what we saw here, but I think we'll see more of him. We maybe even see a full reveal of his face, unless we see him first in the Arkham show. Whenever that comes out, I don't quite know the schedules of that. I imagine that will probably come, though, before the show. But maybe it's a full-on post-credit scene. Maybe he has multiple scenes. Maybe he's a supporting character. But I do think that, for me at least, I'm just going off of my own gut feeling, could be completely wrong. I think that we will see him as that main antagonist for the third film. Maybe he gets out of Arkham and he's the full-on clown prince of crime that we all have to use that term about him, and maybe he's pulling the strings from behind the scenes and orchestrating all this, madness and chaos in Gotham. And then maybe we finally see him and Batman toe-to-toe go confront. I mean, not mean like punches, but be the full-on main antagonist of that third film. Could be completely wrong. Who knows? Okay, the final topic of today. Is this film better or worse than The Dark Knight? Now, this is a tricky one. So I talked about this with my friends yesterday. A couple of them asked me, and I couldn't give an answer right away. I still had to digest the film, because it's a lot. It's a 3-hour film, right? The pacing was great, but it's still a lot to take in. I slept on it. I talked about it some more with a friend of mine, Shezwin, and I do think this is better than The Dark Knight. I do. And The Dark Knight might have better rewatchability because it is a shorter film. But even then, I might rewatch it tonight. And if I immediately want to watch it for a third time, then I don't know. I don't even know about rewatchability. I mean, like I said, this is just my opinion, obviously. Yeah, I think as a pure Batman comic book film, they nailed everything perfectly. And while I love The Dark Knight, there are there's some big gaping holes in that film that to this day still kind of bug me. I'm not a fan of the third act. of The Dark Knight. As much as I love Heath Ledger's Joker, I kind of wish we learned a little bit more about his character. I'm sure that was probably on purpose to leave things up for interpretation. And while I love The Dark Knight, Batman wasn't even my favorite part of that film, right? Like, I know I just criticized the Joker character a little bit, but aside from that little nitpick, Heath Ledger as the Joker was my favorite part of that film, not Batman. Love Bruce Wayne, love Christian Bale, one of the best actors in the world. He's my second favorite Batman now. But don't get me wrong. The Dark Knight is still a top 10, comic book film of all time. Maybe even top 20 film of all time. So it's still one of the greatest pieces of art, cinema, film, whatever you want to call it. It's still fantastic. But this film, if we're just looking at the character of Batman, I think this film is better. And I really, really do. And I'll be honest, I'll go on a limb. I say it's better by a fair bit. By a fair bit. Not by a lot, but by a pretty decent amount, in my opinion. Like I said, I didn't say this. I'm trying not to be reactionary, right? I didn't say immediately when the movie and the credits started to roll, I didn't say, oh my God, this is better than The Dark Knight. This is the best movie I've ever seen in my entire life. No, I didn't say that. I kind of said, okay, I don't have an answer yet. I got to sit on it. I got to digest it. I got to just take it all in, process it. And I did. And I genuinely do think it's better than The Dark Knight. But anyways, guys, that is the last topic to cap off today's episode. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you think this is the greatest Batman film, or tell me if you think it's the worst Batman film. I want to know your thoughts, so let me know. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about it in the comments below. Guys, take care. I hope you all have a great and fantastic day, and I will see you on episode 23.